Rail travel opened up the world in the 19th century. It didn't just provide easy, speedy access to places across the UK, but to far-flung countries across the continent. It's a thrill that's never left us. An exciting adventure very close to my heart. I can't quite believe what I'm about to tell you, because I'm off to see something that has fascinated me ever since I was a teenager. I'm off to see the remarkable international architecture of the railway that connects Britain to the rest of the world. The Channel Tunnel. In 1986, the British and French governments agreed to the construction of a railway tunnel linking their two countries. It would become one of the biggest feats of British and French engineering ever completed, and marked a new era in Anglo-French relations. Elizabeth II and the French President François Mitterrand were in attendance when the tunnel finally opened in 1994. I say finally because it had been in the planning for nearly 2 centuries. But before I head off to the tunnel itself, there's a station I must stop at first: Ashford International. I'm meeting Daniel Wright, a transport planner turned writer, who's as enthusiastic about this building as I am. Daniel, I've come to this station a number of times, but what is it about it that you love?
Well, it has a lot of interesting influences on it, not least of which is, if you have a look, this is basically Southgate Tube Station, except supersized.
It is. It's Southgate, isn't it? Of course it is. It's been kind of brought up and extruded and made massive. Southgate Station opened in 1933 and is one of Charles Holden's most distinctive stations.
Although, as you'll know, Southgate is entirely circular, whereas this is a bit of a trick because it's a semicircular end to a much bigger building. But it's not the only influence of Charles Holden's work for London Underground in the interwar period. For instance, there's the glass top to the International Building, which has got curved glass ends, very like East Finchley Tube Station.
Now, this is incredible because those buildings are what, 1920s, 30s era? This is a lot later.
Yeah, but you can't beat a classic, can you? And it's not the only building from that era that's influenced this station as well. There's a building called the Maison de Verre, or House of Glass, in Paris, and its exterior was notable because it's made of glass blocks in a sort of steel framework. It was very influential, not least on Ashford International itself, as you can see, which has glass blocks in a steel framework. You know, we were opening this brand new route between us and mainland Europe, and it seems entirely appropriate to have a station that was influenced by things that were happening in Paris.
Why did they decide to build an international station here at Ashford on the Eurostar route?
Well, it was a really logical place to build it because it's the convergence of several different railway routes. It's a big railway junction. This side was pretty much built entirely for international passengers. And this is where you needed to have the space for the passport controls and the security checks.
Of course, because you're not just building a new railway station. You've got the whole security of international travel, haven't you?
Yes, if you go inside it, you've got check-in and arrivals and departures right in front of you. So it's quite unlike a domestic railway station.
It must have been quite an exciting brief to get as an architect, mustn't it? Because I suppose it's akin to an aircraft terminal, international travel, but a domestic station as well.
Yeah, it must have been a real challenge. The architects were a British Rail company called Architecture and Design Group, and it was basically their last job for British Rail because British Rail was privatised pretty much after Ashford International was done. It was British Rail's last big station. It's another one of the reasons I really like it.
So it's kind of their swan song, perhaps?
Yeah.
This operated as one of the key UK link stations until 2007, when the high-speed rail link opened. It still welcomes domestic services to this day, but trains bound for France were transferred to Ebbsfleet International, 32 miles away, leaving Ashford with only a handful of services to the continent. But its fate was sealed by the COVID pandemic. Passenger numbers were crushed to the point that no more international services are planned to stop at this station for the foreseeable future. And that feels like rather a shame.
So we have this supersized version of Southgate Tube Station, all its glamour and the glory of Holden. So much thought, but no one's getting to see it.
Yeah, it's sort of one of those accidents of history, in a way. It's a kind of monument to a sort of forgotten period of the end of British Rail at a time when there wasn't much confidence in the railways.
Ashford is certainly impressive from the outside. But, lucky old me, I'm getting a closer look inside this station with its split personality, starting with the domestic platforms.
So this whole station really is operated independently. The two kind of different types of services, or it was?
Yes, I mean, it was essentially designed to keep international passengers and domestic passengers apart from each other. So international passengers would start in the international terminal, they'd go up and across a big footbridge and then drop down onto their international platforms to get into the trains there. But domestic passengers come in at an entrance on the other side, they go under a subway and they come up to the platforms.
So never the twain shall meet?
Yeah, two stations wrapped into one.
It is actually really very clever, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really clever design.
You said that this place has got influences of the London Underground, perhaps, and maybe some of the French architecture influences too. Maybe that's quite appropriate for being a railway portal that goes down underneath the sea, across to France, through an underground tunnel.
Yeah, absolutely. You could close your eyes, open them again, and maybe you could be in France with some of this architecture.
There's definitely sort of a modernist or even Deco-Renaissance feel here, isn't there?
Those glass bricks, the curved ends, the cantilevered platform canopies, they're all very reminiscent of that kind of era. It's an overlooked gem, I think, and hopefully one day it'll be recognised as a classic of early 90s railway architecture.
Walking through this station rather makes me feel like I should have brought my passport.
Sliding doors at the end of the airport terminal.
Yeah, and look at those rubber bumpers, they're just like an airport terminal.
It is.
And from here, I can clearly see the culprit behind Ashford's dashed continental dreams.
So these days, the Eurostars don't stop at Ashford International at all. They bypass it on the high-speed line, which is right there.
Oh, of course, and this is the massive double-track viaduct made from concrete that goes around the corner of the station, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really complicated set of junctions just to the north of the station to tie together the high-speed line and the tracks that let him get into the station.
In fact, there's one now.
There is now. Those are quick trains.
I mean, talk about flying by train.
Yeah, absolutely.
Remarkably, they can reach speeds of 186 miles per hour.
I feel rather sad, actually. These trains zipping off to the continent are missing out on this railway architecture here.
Well, it's true, but who knows what's going to happen in a couple of years' time. Maybe they'll start calling here again one day. And HS1's had a great legacy as well as a high-speed rail link because there are domestic services now which come up from the coast, call at Ashford International and then join the high-speed line to fly to London.
All is not in vain, then.
Ashford is just the start of my continental railway adventure. I'm on the Kent coast, exploring the iconic railway structure which links Britain to France. The Channel Tunnel. Stretching 31.5 miles, it's the world's longest undersea tunnel. It actually comprises 3 tunnels, running almost parallel to each other, and a staggering 22 million people a year travel through here on both passenger and vehicle trains. I imagine most travellers take it for granted, but today I want to show you some of the lesser-known parts of this mind-boggling piece of infrastructure.
I've used this terminal dozens of times. In fact, the very first time I came down here was with my family to use it just because it was brand new and just because it was here. But this time, I'm here for a very different kind of reason.
Yep, it's not a holiday, but my levels of excitement are just the same. Because I'm about to get an exclusive tour of the service tunnel with Public Affairs Director John Keefe.
Well, this is really privileged access, isn't it, I think? Because people don't normally get to see this tunnel at all.
No, it's usually reserved for our maintenance technicians so that they can get in and do all of the repair work that's essential to keep this infrastructure moving. But it's there as a 50-kilometre long lifeboat, just in case we need to take people off a train.
Well, you can probably tell this, but I'm really quite excited to go down and see this thing. I waited years to see this.
And now I'm pinching myself because we're actually going in. And I've no idea what to expect.
Oh, we're in. This feels like super industrial. Where exactly are we? What is this?
So this is the airlock. This is the barrier between the outside world and the overpressure environment inside the service tunnel. We keep it overpressure so that we've always got fresh air to push out into the running tunnels.
Oh, you feel your ears going a bit. That's weird.
Yeah, you feel your ears pop as you're coming in. Yeah.
I didn't expect that, and now the doors are swinging open wide. Oh, this must be the longest road tunnel in Britain.
Well, yes, although of course half of it's in France. You know, the remotest part is 25 kilometres from the entrance to the tunnel. So we have to have equipment here underground all of the time, particularly emergency equipment.
Working in an undersea tunnel has particular challenges, which also leads to some unique solutions.
And suddenly it's gone dark. The lights have gone off. Why the change?
Well, when the lights are on, it means that there could be somebody working in that sector. When the lights are off, it tells us that there's nobody there. So it's a communication system in its own sense.
That's sensible.
We're still travelling under land, but we're heading now into a part of the tunnel which looks quite different to the narrow passageway we've experienced so far. And there's a good reason.
Tim, this wider section that we're going through tells us that we're now under Samphire Hoe, because this was where they brought the equipment down for the tunnelling.
Samphire Hoe was the original construction site. It's where all the bored-out spoil was placed. It was then transformed into a vital storage area for the tunnel's essential ventilation and cooling equipment. It's extraordinary to know that we're travelling directly beneath it.
And then as we go further forward, you'll see that the tunnel narrows again, which means that we're coming out of the Samphire Hoe site, and this is where the tunnel starts to go under the sea.
Oh, this is the really good bit. This is the exciting bit.
So we're now setting off on our journey to France.
I mean, there aren't many tunnels in the world that take cars and trains under the sea. This is terrific.
I'm just going to stop and show you something I think you'll find rather interesting.
So how far are we down the tunnel?
We're about 10 kilometres from the portal in Folkestone.
This is really very odd. There's a join here in materials.
Yeah, so the concrete sections are what were put down by the tunnel boring machines. And then when they reached this particular segment, they didn't have to dig in the same way because they found this. Well, have a look for yourself.
OK, that's dated 1974, which is about 20 years before you guys turned up.
Yeah. And what this is the junction of the 1980s tunnel with the 1970s tunnel and with the 1870s tunnel cutting across it as well. So you're standing in the middle of history.
That's extraordinary.
Something you might not realise is the Channel Tunnel as we know it today was the third attempt to connect Britain and France under the sea. The idea dates back to 1802, with Napoleon Bonaparte as an early supporter. Work on experimental tunnels started in the late 19th century at Abbot's Cliff near Folkestone. Workers back then used hand tools and a compressed air boring machine. The original entrance still exists, although you'd never know that is what's hidden behind this graffitied shutter.
The history of the Channel Tunnel, you can stretch it back till people first looked across the short straits and saw white cliffs on the other side and went, I wonder what it's like over there. People had ideas of wooden structures, a bit like old mine shafts, running horses and carriages through. And then we came along and we put in all of this beautiful service tunnel and the two running tunnels that are either side.
Bridging across the centuries. I love it.
A further abandoned attempt came in the 1970s before the successful version we're standing in today was seen through to completion.
I had no idea they got this far, but why didn't they go any further?
The usual end of a Channel Tunnel story is politics. And in 1974 in particular, it was just too much money for a government-sponsored tunnel project, so it was put on ice.
When they built this in the 1970s, what did they discover down here?
Essentially, they came across the previous tunnel and they found the pit props and bits of mining equipment. But, you know, they were moving on. It wasn't a history project. I often ask myself coming down here, what would happen if we took one of these out and had a look behind? Would we be looking into history?
Don't tempt me with those things. This is fascinating, but I've got a funny feeling this isn't the end of the surprises down here.
Not at all. I mean, there's another 40 kilometres to go to France this way, and there's quite a lot more to see before we get there.
I'm keen to see inside the cross passages that lead into the main running tunnels. And it seems it's my lucky day.
And this one leads us into the North Running Tunnel.
Crikey, this is like a spaceship or perhaps a submarine.
Well, it's partly like a submarine because this is another airlock door, one of many hundred throughout the whole of the tunnel system. If we have to evacuate a train, we have a safe haven here. So when this door opens, the overpressure air in this service tunnel blows out through there and creates a bubble around the door of the train, so that when people step off the train, they step straight into fresh, clean air and into this safe, secure environment.
And all these pipes I'm seeing coming in here, are these water pipes of some sort?
This one in particular, I think, is interesting because this is firefighting. If we needed to bring the fire and rescue teams in from either side, they could bring their own equipment in and just connect up French and British to the same valve.
It's truly an international project, isn't it, here?
It's international, binational cooperation. This was designed by a group of French and British engineers working together. And often you don't even think what language you're speaking because there is a whole kind of franglais that happens in this tunnel.
You've worked on this project for about 30 years now. What are you most proud of when you come down here through the tunnel?
Most people only see the tiniest tip of the iceberg. But what happens behind the scenes? It's huge, it's enormous, nobody knows about it, but there's a group of people who are passionate about it and spend their whole lives just making it work.
I'm at the National Railway Museum in York with out-of-hours access to a collection which celebrates our great railway heritage. Among the unexpected items squirreled away in the North Shed are clues to how railway architecture was influenced. And perhaps the most surprising impact was had by the police. That's because before the British Transport Police was created in 1949, each railway company had its own private constabulary. In fact, there were 291 private police posts across the British railway network, often situated inside station buildings. Their presence is clear from this rarely seen plan from the mid-1800s, showing a police station inside the terminus at London Bridge. By the early 20th century, railway police forces were being given even more consideration within these buildings, as is shown on this plan of Waterloo, dating from 1909. And it was the force based here, the London and South Western Railway Police, which was involved in solving a major crime in the last days of the Victorian era. A crime which led to the creation of one of the rarest pieces in the museum's collection. Hello, Ollie.
Hello, lovely to meet you.
Lovely to see you, lovely to see you.
Yeah, thank you for coming down.
Dr. Ollie Betts leads the museum's research team. He's on hand to reveal how this miniature railway carriage has huge significance.
This looks amazing. Is it some kind of doll's house?
So it's Barbie and Ken scale, so you might be forgiven for thinking this is some sort of child's toy from about 100 years ago, but that couldn't be further from the truth. This is our London South Western carriage model, which is known across the museum as the murder carriage. This was involved in quite a gruesome murder trial in 1901.
Oh, wow. This is extraordinary.
If I can get you to put these gloves on.
Yeah.
Because it's incredibly unusual and rare piece. If you think about a trial in 1901, you've not got crime scene photography, you've not got a digital reconstruction as we would now. So this is for the jury to come down as we are, to crowd around, to feel the bits and pieces and to understand the murder and the sort of dimensions of the murder.
Exactly what happened in this murder case?
So, if you can imagine on a January morning, 1901, you've got two people in this carriage. You've got William Pearson, a travelling salesman, and Rhoda King, a farmer's wife, who are sitting in the carriage opposite, looking out the window. But unknown to them both is a third traveller, George Henry Hill, alias George Parker, who emerges through here from the toilet into the main carriage,
right,
shoots Pearson to rob him, turns the gun on Rhoda King, who somehow has the presence of mind to convince him not to shoot, and ultimately talks him into throwing the gun out of the window.
Wow.
It keeps him talking for the best part of an hour until they finally arrive in London, at which point Parker bolts from the carriage immediately as the door is opened at the station, and Rhoda King jumps up and shouts after him, "That man is a murderer." And he's chased through the station into the gasworks opposite by the railway policeman and arrested there.
And did this help in the case?
It's quite an open and shut case, but it does help convince the jury that, you know, they can understand every step of the process, and they're talked through it by the railway policeman who made the arrest, who comes down and demonstrates the model.
The drama of Parker's flight from the murder scene took place here at Vauxhall Station in South London, built in the 1840s during the rapid growth of London's railway network. Newspapers reported the frightful murder on the London South Western Railway, and that the killer bolted down the station steps, rapidly pursued by 3 or 4 porters, before police joined the chase. The papers also tell how, barely 2 months after the police caught up with him, George Henry Parker was found guilty and hanged here in Wandsworth Prison. His conviction secured with the help of this model.
Ollie, the attention to detail of this is quite exquisite for what is just a demonstration model, isn't it?
The handles turn.
Oh, wow.
The doors open. You've even got the window that goes up and down and the retractor sash.
Isn't this the communication cord?
Yeah, this is the communication cord that you could have pulled in an emergency. This was a smoking compartment. They've even painted the little smoking demarcation onto the window. You've got a little towel on the towel rail in the toilet, and the fold-down sink. It's built by the apprentices at Eastleigh Carriage Works for the trial. Clearly, the apprentices putting this together have had a lot of fun, demonstrating all of their different skills that they've learned.
And actually, is this the right carriage maquette as well for the seat?
Almost certainly the same maquette that was being used on the full-scale seats. It's been very professionally flush-fitted as well.
So, yeah, and so 1901, so the turn of the century, the architectural press are referring to railway carriages as rooms on wheels, aren't they?
Oh, no, absolutely.
So this was seen actually as a piece of architecture in some ways.
I know, it's just beautiful, isn't it? This is only one of 2 crime scene models in the entire country that survives.
Well, it is so rare to get hands-on access to collection objects like this, so thank you so very much.
From cracking crime to providing a portal to the world, railway architecture across the globe has many talents. It's why I'm such a groupie. And I'm in good company, because my next spectacle was a huge hit with some of history's brightest stars. Because, like the Channel Tunnel, it was a gateway to Europe. This is Folkestone Harbor Station, barely 22 miles from the coast of France. Here, visitors now walk where trains once ran. There's a real story behind this pretty unusual sight. It's the story of a station and a town whose fortunes are rising again because it's drawing on its railway history as a great hub of international travel. At its height, this station was at the heart of world events. Our guide to this fascinating station is local railway historian John Hendy.
Here I am standing on the tracks by Platform 1, and Queen Victoria was here in 1899. The crowned heads of Europe all alighted from their trains and went to the continent. Statesmen, Churchill, Roosevelt, they were all here. The history of this place is enormous.
That history began in the early 1840s, when the ambitious South Eastern Railway bought the neglected harbour at Folkestone and built a new station close to the pier. It was connected to the mainland by this splendid viaduct, meaning trains from London could travel right into the new harbour station. The South Eastern's dream of revolutionising international travel was about to be realised.
People would catch a train in London, come straight to Folkestone Harbor, walk a short distance to a ship, and be on the continent. And when in June 1843, this was done for the very first time, with 300 respectable people, as the newspapers said at the time, people in Boulogne were amazed that they were able to read that morning's London newspapers.
Boulogne and back in a day, proclaimed London magazines. A small fishing harbour was on the way to becoming a hugely significant transport hub. It had stolen a march on the bigger, more established port of Dover, just a few miles along the coast. The South Eastern Railway was convinced it was onto a hit in Folkestone. So convinced it immediately built this grand hotel by the pier for passengers awaiting their onward journeys. But running a train service connecting with boats posed some significant challenges, because Folkestone is a tidal harbour.
The problem with the service that was running was that because the tide changed every day, so did the times of the boat trains.
And this was much more than the irritation of an ever-changing timetable. It was a recipe for disaster. In June 1865, the boat train derailed at Staplehurst in Kent. Charles Dickens was among the survivors, but 10 people died because a foreman overseeing track repairs read the wrong timetable.
So it was vital to establish a service which was non-tidal, so that the boat trains ran at regular times every day, and this was finally established in 1883, after a further extension to the pier had been built.
This architectural solution to the problem confirmed Folkestone's status as a major port. And I've no doubt about the historic achievement here. Creating a direct rail connection to cross-channel boats transformed the horizons of 19th century travellers, and Folkestone was at the centre of a wonder of the age.
What we have here is a very important piece of history. This serves as a constant reminder of the importance of this place as a historic link with the continent.
And what impact did the success of the rail-sea connection have on life here in Folkestone? Someone with a good idea of the answer is Darren Cowd, curator of Folkestone Museum.
The South Pier of Folkestone Harbor is the home of Folkestone Harbor Railway Station from 1850 onwards, and it's an absolute hive of activity, but it's all facilitated by this beautiful Italianate building, the station building and customs house. There were booking halls, toilets, there was even a bullion store for gold bullion.
But traffic through Folkestone would rise to a new level when war broke out in 1914.
The reason for Folkestone becoming the point of embarkation is because the War Office want to keep casualties separate from the soldiers going out onto the Western Front, because they don't want to cause an issue with morale And during that period, there's over 10 million individual journeys made through Folkestone Harbor Station and out onto the steamers onto the Western Front.
In 1915, two sisters, Margaret and Florence Jeffrey, established a canteen on the station platform. They provided free refreshments for soldiers just off the train and heading to fight. The sisters invited the troops passing through to sign a visitor's book. The 8 volumes are preserved in Folkestone today.
And in these books that we have here, we have details of pretty much every single person, of those 10 million journeys that were made during the war.
The collection of signatures was still taking place in the autumn of 1919, when visitors included Prime Minister David Lloyd George and the War Secretary Winston Churchill. Folkestone's importance as a port continued into World War II, but that meant the town and its railway buildings were a target for German artillery, who fired shells from across the channel.
In 1942, the inevitable happened, and one of those shells was a direct hit on the harbour station buildings. The Queen's Warehouse, the booking hall and everything was destroyed.
Folkestone survived German bombardment, and the town flourished in the decades after the war. However, Folkestone's port couldn't survive the engineering breakthrough of the Channel Tunnel.
And that's what changes, really, things on Folkestone Harbour and for the harbour branch forever, because its need has effectively evaporated overnight. And by 2012, the last train had run and the station was formally closed in 2014.
I'm sorry to say that Folkestone Harbour Station fell into severe decay. But help was coming down the track. In 2017, the Folkestone Harbor Company launched the redevelopment of the station. And these days, the planted walkways and restored bridge make for a relaxed family day out. Especially as the old signal box has been transformed into a cafe. And as the owner, Alex Field, explains, its name reinforces its railway heritage.
So the nickname for a signalman was a bobby, so that's why we've named it Bobby's Bakehouse. So yeah, we're really pleased that the heritage is still here. It's nice to see how it would have looked once upon a time.
How wonderful that this signal box turned cafe is packed with railway memorabilia. And there's one big piece of history that's impossible to ignore.
Centrepiece of our cafe is the signal levers. This one still works. Very noisy. Obviously not as... Oh, God. Signalmen would never touch these with their hands. They would always use a cloth as to keep them shiny, but obviously we keep them as well as preserved as we can.
And for a business owner like Alex, there's a clear value in protecting and renewing Folkestone's railway history.
I just think each year and year tourists are coming down to Folkestone to see the regeneration of what used to be a railway.
Thanks to those German shells in 1942, only about 10% remains of the original station building, a structure which once stretched right along this harbour. However, what survives today is looking very fine indeed, thanks to a major makeover in recent years.
It's been beautifully restored with the stonework refreshed, the Poseidon's head above the doorway repaired, and also 2 new beautiful hardwood doors hung with recast hinges using the original hinge points on the doorway itself.
And at the station, the restoration offers vivid reminders of those halcyon days, delighting railway enthusiasts like John Hendy.
We have marvellous signs which they've recreated not only in English but also in French to remind all the foreign travellers where they can go and send a telegram or find inquiries. And over on the far platform, the Southern Railway bullseye sign. And I think that's rather wonderful.
I'm thrilled to say this wonderful restoration has reinvigorated Folkestone's great railway heritage. And it points the way to the revival of an entire town. Just north of Folkestone Harbor, I'm on an exclusive backstage tour of the architecture which stole its thunder, the Channel Tunnel. My guide is John Keefe, who's spent the past 30 years living and breathing this vast binational undersea railway.
This building looks fairly important.
Oh, it is. This is the nerve centre. This is where all the magic happens. There's on 2 levels.
Here lies the beating heart of this unique network.
You actually let me in. I can't believe this.
The Railway Control Centre.
So here you are.
You promised me a surprise, and this is definitely one. This is extraordinary, but what exactly are we looking at here?
So this is the mimic board of the entire concession infrastructure from the UK to France. Everything is here at a glance. So you can see where the trains are, you can see what's moving, you can see what's planned to move. Just scan across it and you can see the whole thing.
You say it's a mimic board for operators up here, but there's no one here today. What's happening?
No, because we've got 2 of these. So we've got one of these in France, and today we're operating from France. But if we needed to switch, there is a crew of controllers in the building, and they would come straight in here and pick up and be able to run, and it would be seamless.
This is really quite eerie. With no controllers in sight, it gives the impression of a silently automatic international railway running all by itself. But of course, that's not the case. Every train is numbered and strictly timetabled, so controllers know where it is at any given moment.
Talking capacity, in the tunnel right now, I can see there's a 9, there's a 6, a 6, a 7, all underground right now, under the channel.
Yeah. We have to remember the tunnel's 50 kilometres long. The 9 is a Eurostar that'll be doing 100 miles an hour. The 6 is a passenger shuttle that'll be doing 90 miles an hour. The 7 is a passenger shuttle doing 90 miles an hour. So those 3 will always maintain the same distance between themselves. The Eurostar will be catching up with the train in front of it, but it's got 50 kilometres and it's only 10 miles an hour faster. So we've timetabled that to make sure that 6440 will be clear before the Eurostar gets to the end of the tunnel so that it can carry on at full speed onto the SNCF network.
I don't want to demean this in any way, but it's a little bit like looking at a huge train set.
Yes, this is 35-year-old tech, and it's fantastic for the overview. But in reality, when we're working, our controllers are working off detail screens on their desks. We've got measures for pretty much every incident you could conceive of in a railway environment, and it's all managed here.
John, I've never been to an international signal box that manages trains that run under the ocean before, so how does it actually all work?
It's very similar to a standard signal box, if you like. If we start in France, we've got the lines of the platforms up at the top. You can see those, and they've got trains parked on them. So 2 passenger shuttles at the top, 2 freight shuttles at the bottom. So we've got eyes on everything that we need to see.
Actually then, it's more like NASA, this whole thing, all the overviews you've got.
It is. It's not quite as far as putting a man on the moon to send somebody across the channel through a 50-kilometre tunnel, but it is a little bit of the concept of mission control.
All these people are in your responsibility, aren't they?
Yeah, we could have, on a busy day, 400 trains going through. On a Eurostar, 900 people. On a passenger shuttle, 1,000 people. So we are looking after an enormous number of people. 22 million per year go through this tunnel.
It's actually quite beautiful in the way it's all run. It is quite brilliant. I had no idea the complexity behind this. It's been a privilege to have a look at it and share it with people, so thank you so very much.
Thank you for coming.
I quite often say that I'm chuffed to bits to have seen inside a building or had a look around somewhere to explore it. But today's been really very special indeed, because this place I never thought I'd get to see.